Remote assistance. So you've got Windows XP installed in your computer, but then something goes wrong with the computer. There's some problem with the devices or the software. Well, there's a new feature in Windows XP called Remote Assistance, which allows a user to request that another user remotely connect to their computer to assist them in troubleshooting the problems that they might be having. In this video, we'll learn what the requirements are in order to establish a remote assistance connection. And once those requirements have been met, we'll learn how to send an invitation to another user to allow them to establish a remote assistance connection to our computer. And once they're connected, we'll learn how they can remotely control our computer in order to assist us in any troubleshooting tasks that we might have. So let's start off by taking a look at what the requirements are for our remote assistance connections. First off, let's define some terms. The user that needs help is called a novice user, which we have right here, and the user that will help and remotely connect to the novice user's computer is called the expert user. The novice user and the expert user can be on the same computer network, or they can be on different computer networks as we have right here. In order for the expert user to connect to the novice user's computer, either within a network or across networks as we have here, the novice user must first submit a remote assistance invitation to the expert user. And once the expert user has the invitation, a connection will be made to the novice user's computer. There are, however, several factors which can prevent this connection from taking place. First off, in order for the novice user to submit a remote assistance invitation to an expert, both computers must be running Windows XP. This feature is only available on Windows XP and can't be installed on other Windows operating systems. And the main reason for this is because Windows XP includes a client-side terminal server service, which is not found on other Windows operating systems. And remote assistance essentially runs on top of the terminal server service, which uses port 3389. And this is where things get a little tricky here. If this port is closed, it's going to block remote assistance invitation requests. Port numbers are one of the components that allow applications to send and receive data over a TCP/IP network. For example, port 80 is used for all web browser traffic to be sent to and from that computer. It's simply acting as an endpoint of communication. So here our novice user is telecommuting and working from home, and our expert user is a corporate help desk personnel and is on the corporate network, and between each user is the internet. And most consumers and companies use some type of firewall to protect their network from all the bad people on the internet. There are many types of firewalls that are available to get protection from the internet, but a very popular method these days is to use something called the network address translation. And what this does is it's a relatively inexpensive method to allow users on a private network to connect to the public network, which is the internet, by essentially sharing a single IP address that's valid on the internet. So our NAT connection would have a single IP address which gets us out to the internet here. NAT also protects the users on this private network over here from intruders on the internet by effectively hiding the network connection right here. And there are two types of NAT devices that we can get: non-universal plug-and-play NAT device and a universal plug-and-play NAT device represented by a UPnP. A non-universal plug-and-play NAT device would effectively block port 3389, which is going to prevent our remote assistance session from taking place. On the other hand, if we have a universal plug-and-play NAT device, the universal plug-and-play functionality in NAT will allow the remote assistance to detect the public IP address on this NAT device and take that IP address and insert it into the remote assistance ticket or the invitation, which in turn allows for the remote assistance session to take place. So really the difficulty that we face here is whether or not the novice user and the expert users are behind non-universal plug-and-play or universal plug-and-play NAT devices. So out of all this, we have four different scenarios which govern whether or not we can establish a remote assistance session. The first scenario is if one user, such as the novice user right here, is behind a NAT device and the other user is behind a universal plug-and-play NAT device, we can establish a remote assistance session as long as Windows Messenger is used to initiate the session. If both users, in contrast, are behind the non-universal plug-and-play NAT device, then a remote assistance session cannot take place because we're not going to be able to communicate over port 3389. In contrast, if both the novice and the expert users are behind universal plug-and-play NAT device, then everything's okay. We can establish a session. And also, if users are behind the internet connection sharing, a method for connecting to the internet, which is basically NAT Lite for home users, then we can also establish a remote assistance session when ICS is being used, or internet connection sharing. So with that information in hand, let's close out of here and see how all this works. The first step that we have to do is make sure that remote assistance has been enabled on our computer. We do that by clicking on Start, select My Computer, right-click My Computer, and then choose Properties. That brings up the System Properties Control panel, and then from here we have a Remote tab. Click on the Remote tab, and this area can only be accessed if you've logged on either as a local administrator or as a domain administrator. From here, make sure that this option, Allow Remote Assistance Invitations to be sent from this computer, is enabled. If this option is not enabled, you effectively have turned off remote assistance because you're not able to send an invitation to allow somebody to connect to your computer. Additionally, there's some other options underneath the Advanced button. Let's take a look at that. Once a remote assistance invitation has been sent and a connection has been made to the novice user's computer, that initial connection is just in a read-only mode, meaning the expert user cannot take over the user's computer until two things have happened. Number one, this option, allow this computer to be controlled remotely, has to be enabled. And number two, the novice user has to agree to having their computer taken over and controlled remotely by the expert user. Also, the default amount of time that new invitations are good for are based on the value that we see right here. For example, if we were to use this 30-day value, that would mean that any person that receives an invitation based on this value would be able to use the same invitation to connect to the remote computer for the next 30 days. So that might be a little too liberal here. We can click on the drop-down arrow and change the amount of days to a number that we specify, or we can change the value from days to hours to minutes. Let's try a value of 30 minutes. And let's close out of here now and see how we actually send these invitations so we can establish a remote assistance connection. There are three methods that we can use for sending a remote assistance invitation. The first is using Windows Messenger, the second is email, and the third is creating a special remote assistance file. Let's take a look at using Windows Messenger first. And Windows Messenger is installed on Windows XP computers as a default. It's found in your notification area, which is this area in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. Used to be called the system tray. It's now referred to as the notification area because balloons will pop up from this area every once in a while notifying you of events such as hardware has been installed. So let's start this up just simply by double clicking on the Windows Messenger icon. We can use Windows Messenger for establishing a chat, audio, video sessions. We can also use this for sending files and a whole bunch of other features. But to establish a remote assistance connection, we would double click on a contact that's online that we want to establish the connection with. In this case it's Seth, so we'll double click on Seth. Then on the right hand side we have an option here that says ask for remote assistance. So we would click on that link, and that's going to send an invitation to Seth, and Seth would have to respond to that invitation. And once Seth has said yes, I would like to establish a session, then a remote assistance session will be established in a read-only mode. Also, remember that we're using Windows Messenger for establishing a remote assistance session when one user is behind a non-universal plug-and-play NAT device and the other user is behind a universal plug-and-play NAT device. Let's close out of here now and we'll take a look at using our other methods for sending a remote assistance invitation, and we'll use those other methods to actually establish a connection and see how to remotely control a computer using remote assistance. The Help and Support Center can be used to send an email invitation and a file invitation. Let's see how we do that by clicking on Start. Click on Help and Support, and that's going to fire up the Help and Support kind of home page. In the top right hand corner we have this link that says invite a friend to connect to your computer with remote assistance. Let's click on that, and that brings us to this area where on the right hand side we can invite someone to help us out. So let's click on that, and this is kind of one-stop shopping for sending out remote assistance invitations. At the top we see Windows Messenger, so we can use this method in addition to the Windows Messenger icon in the right hand corner. And if we slide down here we can use email. The only email programs that you can use are Outlook Express and Outlook. And last but not least we have this option at the bottom that says save an invitation to a file. There's actually one other tool that we can use to send out remote assistance invitations, and that's found by clicking on Start, choose All Programs, and then as a default off the All Programs menu you'll find a little icon right here called Remote Assistance. If we were to click on that, that actually brings you to the same Help and Support Center homepage. Help desk personnel find it a little easier to have users send a remote assistance invitation to them by using that remote assistance icon off the Start menu, which is why we have these two options. Now let's kick this off by actually creating an invitation, and let's slide down here and let's see how we use email. So we can type in an email address, or if we have somebody in our address book we can just click on address book and select a person from our address book. Let's do that right now. I'll select Seth and then click on invite this person, and we're going to send a message to that person. So let's put in a little message here saying help, my computer is busted. Okay, thank you very much. Let's click on continue. And if you notice here, there's something a little strange. It says that our invitation will be good for 1 hour, but if you remember earlier we set the default invitation time to 30 minutes. Well, that's going to change in just a second. We need to complete one more step here and we'll see how that changes. Additionally, we can password protect this invitation that's being sent out. The actual invitation file will be an XML file, and if we decide to password protect the invitation, the password will be encrypted within that file. So let's type in a little password here. And then our last step is to click on send invitation, and when I click on this button we're going to get a dialog box that's going to come up saying hey laughing boy, you've tried to set the invitation time for 1 hour, but based on the default settings it can only be good for 30 minutes or less. You sure you want to keep going with this? Absolutely. So once we click on the OK button and scroll back up here, we see that the invitation time has changed from the 1 hour setting to the default setting of 30 minutes that we established on the advanced settings just a moment ago. The password that we've entered in here will have to be supplied to the user that receives this invitation. Once the user receives the invitation, they'll double click on the invitation and they'll have to enter in a password in order to actually establish the connection. So you'll have to use some alternate means of supplying that user with the password. Just pick up the phone and call them, but don't include the password within the email in case somebody hijacks your email on the internet or something like that. So our last step is to just simply click on the send invitation button. We'll send that out via email. Just a little Outlook Express warning saying, do you want to send this? A little security precaution. Yes, thank you very much. And poof. And down below here we now see that we have one invitation queued up. Let's take a look at that. So we just click on the link and this page shows us every single invitation that we've ever sent out. So if we wanted to view the details of an invitation, you would select the invitation, click on details, shows you when it was sent, when the actual invitation expires, what the message was, is this password protected, and if you sent the invitation out and it's still good but you decided you changed your mind, you don't want that person to connect, or you're going to be away from your computer, something like that, you can expire the ticket even though it's been sent out. or if you had an email glitch, you can resend the invitation, also called a ticket. And if the invitation has expired and we just want to get rid of all the invitations that are listed here, we can select the invitation and delete it. So let's go back and look at our third and final method for sending a remote assistance invitation, and that's by creating a file. So let's click on here. We'll scroll all the way down to the bottom and then click on Save Invitation as File. And it's very similar to email. We're just going to say this is from the novice user, and once again this interface, for whatever reason, displays its own default time, even though it'll take the settings for the default time for the invitation from the advanced selection that we've chosen. And so we get the same silly warning again. You just click on OK, say yeah, and it changes. Thank you very much, Microsoft. Click on Continue. Would you like to password protect this? Absolutely. Let's put in a password here. And then we click on the Save Invitation button. Then it's asking you, where would you like to save this invitation? This will typically be saved maybe on a just a file that you place on your desktop, and then you can send it out via email at a later point. Or better yet, we can save this invitation to a SharePoint within your network. So let's click on our My Network icon. Let's go to the entire network. Go to our domain. And I happen to have a SharePoint here called RI Tickets. Let's go to that, click on Save. And let's close out of here and take a look at that ticket. So we're going to go to Start, select My Computer, go to My Network Places, and I happen to have that SharePoint right here, so we'll double click on RI Tickets. And here's the actual ticket. So when I double click on it, it's going to ask me to enter in that password. So what I'm going to do right now is pause the video and go to our novice user's computer and create another ticket, and with that other ticket we'll use that to establish a remote assistance session. So I've gone to the novice user's computer and created a remote assistance file and uploaded that to the server. So let's kick this puppy off by double clicking on our invitation to join the party here. And we'll type in the password that the novice user had provided to us and click on Yes. So now we're waiting for the novice user to accept the connection. If we notice at the very top it says our status is waiting for an answer. So we're not going to be connected immediately. We have to wait for the novice user to accept the remote assistance connection request, and they have just accepted the request. And if you notice, the status is now switched to screen view only, and what that means is we can't change anything on the desktop. We're in a read-only mode. So if I double click on the Start button, I can click on this till I'm blue in the face, but nothing's going to happen right now. What we can do right now is carry on a little chat session and find out exactly what the problem is. So I can type in hi Seth, and they might respond back saying maybe hey there. And if we scroll up here a little bit, we can see the conversation occurring on the novice user's desktop as well. This is all well and good, but I'm sure the novice would like us to resolve the problem, and to do that we're going to have to switch from this screen view only mode. We switch from this mode to a full control mode by going up to the top left hand corner of this interface and click on the Take Control button. And when we do that, we're basically issuing a request to the novice user. Can we take control of your computer? And we have to wait for the novice to respond back, allowing us to take control. So the novice has just said, yes, I'm going to allow you to take control with this proviso. I'm always going to maintain control of the session. So the novice at any point can press the escape key to release control and switch to the screen view only modes. That's fine, not a problem. And now when we scroll down to the Start menu, we should be able to click on that and have it respond, and indeed we can. Ooh, cool stuff. So now that we're in control of our novice user's computer, it's time to get down to business and troubleshoot the problem that's occurring on that computer. And to facilitate that, we can change our window view from actual size to scale to window, and that allows us to see the entire desktop. For this example, I'm just going to use actual size. So for example, let's say that our novice user is having a problem with the sound card in their computer. Well, we could try to resolve that by bringing up the computer management console and looking at the sound card device. And we do that by clicking on Start, then select My Computer, then right-click My Computer, and then choose Manage. Then we have to scroll up here a little bit. That brings up the computer management console. And here's the cool thing, ladies and gentlemen. We're remotely connected to this computer, accessing the device manager and everything else here. So now we can try to resolve this problem without having to drive across town to get to that user's computer, or worse, fly across the country to try to resolve the problem for this novice user. So you come in here, maybe you update a driver, you resolve the problem, and now you are the king of the hill, and that novice user is going to be buying you lunch and sending you tickets to movies for the next year and a half. So once the problem is being resolved, you just close out of all the dialog boxes you had been working in, and last but not least, you just click on Release Control, and that returns you to screen view mode only, where you can carry on a chat session. But if you had the right equipment installed on both computer, you can also have an audio session instead of just sending on text messages. Additionally, we can send files back and forth by clicking on the Send a File button, find the file, and then click on Send File. And the Settings button allows us to change the audio sessions quality. So if we have a nice high-speed internet connection, we can change this to high quality, and also we can change the default window size by choosing the appropriate radio button right here. And then to finish things off, we just click on Disconnect, and that ends our session. So let's do that right now. So that's the 1, 2, 3s of using remote assistance, but I've got a little tip to share with you in regard to establishing a remote assistance session. So if you think that the novice user will have some difficulty using the 3 methods for submitting a remote assistance invitation, what we can do as an expert is offer to the novice user to establish a remote assistance connection. And we do that by using Help and Support, which is found by clicking on Start, select Help and Support, and from this home page, scroll down and locate Tools, click on Tools, and on the left-hand side underneath the Tools category, scroll down and look for the option that says Offer Remote Assistance. Click on that, and from here you would enter in the host name or the IP address of the novice user's computer, click on the Connect button, and then the novice user would see a little dialog box stating that a remote assistance connection request is trying to be established. Would you like to accept this? And once they click on yes, that remote assistance connection will have been established. So this is a really slick method to allow the expert user to establish a remote assistance session on behalf of the novice user. So that brings us to the end of this video, where we've learned that port 3389 has to be open in order to allow remote assistance sessions to be established. We learned how to use Windows Messenger, email, and how to create a remote assistance invitation file to establish that connection. And we use the remote assistance invitation file to actually kick off the connection. Then we saw how we can remotely control a computer to troubleshoot all the problems that may be occurring on that computer. So I hope this video has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.